Hey, so it's Friday, August 21st, 2020, and welcome back to This Week in Housing. I'm Tom Ferry, super excited that you're with us this morning. As always, it's a live show here on Facebook, so we're just going to wait a couple minutes and let everybody, get themselves organized and onto the show. But let's go and introduce our panelists. As always, the man of the hour who brings us all this incredible data, he and his team at KCM. So David, good morning.
Good morning, Tom. It's exciting to be here on, you just said the 21st of August. I had to look at my watch and confirm that.
Yes.
It's crazy.
I think many of us around probably March 20th, actually, let me say this. I would say the first 2 weeks of March went really fast. The second 2 weeks of March of 2020, I felt took like a decade and a half to get through. But I remember, as I said to many of you, that were part of our Pivot program, our coaching members, I said, hey, listen, we're running a marathon, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a 40-yard or a 50-yard dash. We need to slow down and focus on doing the right thing, starting with taking care of you. So it's good to see everybody healthy and moving forward. So let's do some more introductions. Coach Yvonne coming in from Sandpoint, Idaho. Good morning. Good morning, Coach. What's the good word in Sandpoint? I think we lost your audio. There we go.
Well, it's a lovely day up here in North Idaho, and action is happening everywhere. And after this, I'm going to go golfing.
I love it. Well, we're going to show a slide today that I believe Idaho is the only state in the U.S. where affordability hasn't gotten better, because everybody I know from California is moving up there. So congrats. Hope you're selling a bunch.
They're coming from everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same exact thing. So, and we have Coach Alyssia Essig coming in from Baltimore. So good morning, Coach. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, outstanding. So give us a quick State of the Union. What's going on in Baltimore?
Well, it's the same as it's been. It would be April. Like, this is what April feels like when everybody's trying to close today because it's August 21st and they want to get in before school starts, before September happens. And interest rates are just keeping buyers coming into the market. So
it's I know, for three of us as coaches, and for David, because of your activity with so many CEOs and all these companies and all these agents through KCM, we're all seeing the same thing. And I know everybody out here watching live, the phrase I keep using is we basically compressed 6 months of buying and selling activity into maybe 2.5 to 3. And if you're our friends in Manhattan or over the Hudson in Hoboken, it's coming, right? It's coming, and it's coming quickly. It's summertime in New York City, David. Everybody's gone, right? Everybody's gone. But the best agents, like the one I just talked to this morning, big shout out to Josh Rubin. He is listing properties like crazy because he knows his compression of time, which would be about 9 months, into probably 2, September, October. So exciting times. So for my friends that are out there, it's 8:32. Why don't we jump into the show? We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about forbearance. We're going to talk about home prices. We're going to talk about affordability. We're going to talk about a little unemployment. We're going to talk about what the builders are saying, which, by the way, David, the slides on the builders, for everyone that's paying attention. I shared that this morning with a client from New York City who was shocked because, the hallucination is the builders aren't building and, they're not going to build, and they're very nervous and skeptical. Right. And I want to remind all of you of a statement that both David has shared with me as well as Steve Harney. When someone gives you a fact, a data point, something about the market, the question to always ask after you smile and listen with great empathy and understanding is, can you show me the article where you read that? I'd really like to see that, right? Because we know that most people today, they're giving their opinion about the market. They're giving you their fear, the way they view the world versus, hey, let's talk data and facts and math to keep us on the left brain, not on that crazy right brain. So David, with that said, you also were surrounded by 3 redheads, so good luck.
Thank you. I need it.
But let's talk about unemployment numbers. They just came out again. So why don't we start there? And if you want to take over with the slides, and then the ladies and I will jump in and contribute our thoughts and opinions as we go through all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start this conversation around forbearance. It's something we've been talking about over the weeks, and unemployment came out this week. And you made a point there, Tom. Somebody may say, this is going on, or this, or I heard this. There's a difference between what can be said and what somebody can hear, right? And so we always want to bring, this is what's going on in the market. So I'll share this with you. It's the updated, graphic around the weekly unemployment. When I look at this, I go, gosh, you go back to March, and you just mentioned it, Tom, as you were, starting, in the time we've come here, look at the drop in unemployment. Certainly it's high, but the trend there, we're not back where we were. And over time, this is coming down. Now, what's out in the news here this week? So we bumped up a little bit this past week, and that may cause somebody to say, hey, I hear unemployment's going back up, and we're going to watch this and we're going to stay on top of it. But we don't see that trend right now. What we want to look for is a trend. No doubt that we saw a little bit less than 1 million filings the prior week. This week, about 1.1 that came out yesterday. And so we're going to watch that. But the trend there overall is unemployment is dropping. And that conversation always, leads into, what about people that are impacted? And we always say, if there's one person that doesn't have a job that wants it, we want them to have it and get back to work. And, luckily during this time, we've had this thing called forbearance that has been built, by Fannie and Freddie and an avoidance of some of the catastrophe of back in 2008. And I want to start here, some of the concerns of forbearance versus the reality. So if we dial back the clock and we look at what, forecasters were saying, could be as much as 30% of individuals needing to apply for, for help in making their mortgage payment, or some type of assistance because they've been impacted economically through their job, whatever the case may be, in this, health crisis that's caused an economic downturn. Now we know the peak was actually at 8.6% of mortgages that have had to go into active forbearance. And we know currently we sit at about 7.21% of mortgages actively in forbearance. Now, if you follow KCM, you saw a blog we posted this week, and maybe something on Instagram or different platforms.
Hey,
of the number. Go ahead, Tom.
David, before you do though, go back 2 slides for a second.
Yep.
And I want to get the ladies involved in this. I hear at least 2 to 3 times a week in a coaching session, a client will say to me, Alyssia, I've got this buyer I'm working with, I've got this seller I'm working with, and they're waiting for a sign. Right? They're waiting for, like, is it getting better? Is it getting worse before they move forward? So we're going to cover a lot of data today, but I want to get both ladies' opinion on this. To me, when I look at this is a sign, right? This is a sign. So Alyssia, thoughts on that? Yvonne, thoughts on that? Like, how do we help the agents that are watching right now that have that buyer that are like, oh, I want to do it, but I'm just afraid what's going to happen, or is the world going to fall apart? In the first quarter, I heard that one this morning. Everyone's going to get fired in the first quarter. No one's going to go back to the office. All hearsay. Ladies, thoughts and opinions on that first slide?
Go ahead, Alyssia.
So I'm personally not hearing that, to be honest. So I'm not hearing that either in my local practice or amongst my coaching clients. When I look at this slide, and when I looked at it last night, my curiosity, because I always want to break it down just like you, Tom, is how does this slide, and you guys may have covered this, apply, like, I'm sorry, what's the word? The brain just stopped functioning. What does pre-pandemic unemployment applications look like?
Sure.
And so how does our current, so we've come down from the height, and we're now hovering at this like 1.1, right? So what does it relate to? So is this basically, are we kind of back to normal? Like, is that what normal looks like, or is this not normal? And I think if and when I would hear that, I would want that statistic. Like, this is actually no different than non-pandemic life. Like, that's where we are.
I agree. And I would also add, you have to look at your personal area and state, because this is now, employment is now going to be very specific to location. I was just listening to the news. Foot Locker sent all of their employees back, took them all off furlough, except for California. So, you know, when you start looking at those micro spots, you're going to start having difference of opinions in different locations. So make sure you get hyper local.
Yeah.
Sure.
I agree 100%. Alyssia, I should have pointed out higher end, you know, $1 to $4 million price range, people that are working to buy those houses. That's the objection that, you know, a few of these people have been getting. Like, we're just not certain, like, what's going to happen with the election.
I think that's going to start here. We're going to start hearing more of that when we get about 30 days out of that election, maybe a little closer. Right now, the biggest challenge we're seeing isn't about the fear of buying, it's fear of selling. Where am I going to go?
Yeah. Yep. Hey, that's a major topic we'll be discussing at the summit for 2.5 days. So yes.
Yeah. Let me respond to Alyssia's points real quick, because you made a couple of really, really good points. The first one is there is a general fear that is not unfounded. And there are people, I'm going to call them on YouTube and different things, that are saying unemployment's about to go back up. Here's the most direct answer I can give you for that. No one is forecasting that. Are people saying it? Yeah, there are some people saying it.
Sure.
No one reputable is forecasting that. So that's number one. Now, we don't have a crystal ball. I can't give you tomorrow's news, and we're going to follow it. But from a forecasting standpoint, that's not true. Now, the second point was a really good point, is where do we sit relative to pre-pandemic unemployment? Now, those numbers bouncing around, call it 300,000 to 400,000 a week. We're at 1.1. Here's what I call that. We're back in striking distance. Are we there? We're not there.
Yeah.
But we're not at 6 million jobs lost in a week, or some form or fashion there. So that is the story there, is like, okay, now we're at a multiple of 2, maybe 3 times where we were, which is, gosh, when we look at what we've come through, that is great news.
The numbers don't justify the hallucination.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there was a line, David, you said 2 weeks ago, and I think hopefully you can just recall it real quick, about headlines basically creating fear.
Yeah.
What was that line again?
It came, well, first of all, it's not my line. Let me clarify that. It came from a New York Times or a Wall Street Journal article that said headlines do more to terrify than clarify.
Yeah. And
that's the reality of the world that we live in today. Is a headline's designed to get viewership, to get clicks, to get people to look at it. It's not designed to give you any type of information, I would argue.
We're old enough to know the Enquirer magazine on the check stand, you know,
right?
That the headline was to get you to grab it and put it on there to check out.
I can still see it. Michael Jackson's Alien Baby. Yes.
Right.
So let's go to this one, because I think this is also one of those, as I flip it right off the table, the conversation around forbearance, when everybody said, oh my goodness, the whole world's going to end.
Yeah.
Let's go back to this, because I want to hear from the ladies. How would you take this and tell the world, or tell your Instagram and Facebook followers, this story?
I would just say that it's interesting, because this slide and the next one, it's number of mortgages in active forbearance is leveling off. And then the next slides talked about, and we're going to get there, talked about how they're being paid though. They're in active forbearance, but the mortgages are being paid. Right. So you have to take all of that big picture in one piece to explain that to people, that, hey, what they did, in my opinion, consumers went out and heard on the news, stop making your payment.
Yep.
And the banks will be all for it. Okay. Then the consumer went, ruh-roh, that wasn't a good idea. And now they've 2 months, no payment. They went back and started making payments, but they've got to bring those 2 months current. So I think that's where we have to look at that and explain it, that if that were to go away right now, these numbers would even be a lot less.
Yeah. Alyssia, thoughts on that?
Very similar to what Yvonne said. It's about, again, that perception. People only read the headlines, right? It's kind of like the second subject line. They'll read the headline and the second subject line, and then that's it. They think that they've gotten the whole thing, and so they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna not pay my mortgage payment, or I'll go ahead and I'll apply. I think that this is still yet to see, because these the actual forbearance agreements are getting ready to expire, or potentially be extended one way or the other. And I think that between the unemployment, like, people will say, people don't buy a house to not pay their mortgage. They just don't.
No.
So I think that they want to do the right thing. And so we'll see what happens in the next 30 days. The forbearance stuff, again, I'm not hearing a ton of that right now. So
it was all about the fear,
right.
the fear, that initial forecast of 30%, the initial forecast of job losses and how it was going to annihilate businesses and all of that. Now the reality has occurred,
Right.
and it's not as bad as what the initial forecast was.
Right.
David?
Great.
It was in my mind there, Tom, is what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? What's the likely scenario? Those are situations we deal in every day, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes as these things happen, and let's pause in time here and go back just a couple of months where people were saying this is as bad or worse than the Great Depression. And let's look at where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were clicking right into that next slide before I drove us backwards for a couple of minutes there. So the number of mortgages in active forbearance is leveling off.
Correct. So, if you look at this slide, you've seen it, certainly on social, if you're following Keeping Current Matters on Instagram, Facebook, different places. But we look at the beginning of July where we were at about 4.5 million mortgages across the country. And now we sit at 3.9 million that are in mortgages that are in active forbearance. What does that mean? They've declared, hey, we need forbearance. Now we'll break that down just like it was mentioned, and what are people doing there? But the good news is this is leveling off, if not, certainly over the last 2 months dropping. And we want to see that continue to drop. There is a provision by the CFPB. If you're still in trouble, you can continue a request to extend that forbearance. Talked about the significant equity in homes across the country today. If someone should need to liquidate their home, sell their home, and the scenario there, and I think we all, we even talked about that in the Susie Ormond, conversation that we had. And I'm not saying that as we go through the next 12 months, there aren't going to be foreclosures. We're going to actually, the team's breaking down a lot of that right now for what we deliver at the summit. And really we're sitting at a point right now in this country that we're at record low foreclosures because there's been a moratorium placed on foreclosures based on forbearance. And so a lot of that information is starting to come out now, but I think it's compared to where we were, it's favorable.
Yeah. And to be clear, David, there's foreclosures happening every day across the country. Not right now, clearly because of the new regulations, but prior to this, there was foreclosures every day.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. We just, but when we hear foreclosure, we go 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, and and everybody gets into a state of panic. But remember, like it was happening in 2004 when the market was screaming hot. There were still agents that we work with that were getting foreclosure listings.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely.
There's always that. There's always divorce. There's always job loss.
Correct.
There's always death. There's always kinds of things that these happen. And the foreclosure market is consistent. I mean, I've been in that world since 1994. And it just goes, the REO agents that have those accounts, they get them every year, all year long. They're just not in large numbers. And people have to not think so negatively towards that topic.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I flipped the slide here to just show just another reaffirmation of that. The percentages of mortgages that are in forbearance is decreasing as well over the months. You can see it there. If we look at that as a line graph right here, this is very interesting. You see that Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, those deals are dipping down. The one that's kind of plateaued there is labeled private label. Okay, so think about these as, in our business typically is referred to as a non-QM. It's somebody that doesn't fit the box. This is not old alt A or subprime or things like that. And typically in a private label, and this is not true of every one of them, but there's oftentimes a much more fiscally literate person in that's managing debt versus incurring debt. And I think about that a lot of times, and they may be entered forbearance, and the federal government or whoever the servicer was said, you want to pay now or later? And they said, well, I'll pay later, and so we're starting to track this by, the type of loan and what's going on there so that we have a big, a complete picture there. But the point that was made earlier is that more than 1 million households in forbearance here, you see from DS News, it was published just 2 days ago, in forbearance are still paying their mortgage. That comes from MBA and Black Knight that's shown about a quarter of households in active forbearance are still making their mortgage payment. So got about 4 million across the country. 1 million of those are still making their payment and are on time, and the others are in some form of, maybe they've missed multiple payments, maybe they've missed a portion of those payments, and in some form of forbearance relative to that. So we're going to stay on top of this and continue to watch it, but it's very good news relative to what we, where we started in this conversation.
I think also on that private label, people have to remember those include jumbo loans, and a lot of people in the jumbo market, they are company owners, CEOs of companies. They do it strategically. Yeah. So there are certain things that you have to take into consideration on those private label loans as well.
Yeah. So really quick from the audience, I'd like to just ask everybody a question. When you hear all these numbers and these slides and these opinions, I want to know from you in the comments, how do you see yourself educating people on the facts, the data, these talking points that we're discussing? I want to see it in the comments. Let your marketing mind work for a minute. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just give us, how do you see, like literally today, Yvonne, I was on a call with Josh Rubin and I said, okay, so your client told you that in New York City, everyone's going to lose their job in the first quarter. And I just read him all of these slides and he's like, can you send me a copy of those? Right? Because I'm going to make a video on that. Now, Josh is a very successful agent in New York City, my friends, 140, 150 transactions, a couple $100 million in volume. So he just said, I'm just going to take that stuff and just start posting it everywhere. I want to know from all of you, right, in the comments, how are you going to use this? Right. So I want to see it in the comments. And then David, let's go right into prices while they're bringing in their comments here.
Absolutely. So I want to start the pricing conversation off with this. This was a point we made last week. I brought the actual quote here from the Black Knight study that was published by Mortgage News Daily. It says this: those shopping for a home can afford 10% more a home than they could have a year ago, while keeping their monthly payment unchanged. This translates into nearly $32,000 more in buying power. That's the story of the market that we're in right now. And Tom, you and I talked about it last night, of just looking at this and going, this is the message we have to get out there. This is what is the substance of today's market.
Ladies, when you read that, what goes on in your marketing minds?
So much. I mean, I'm sitting here right now and I've got an app on my phone to figure out what payments are. And I plugged in a conventional mortgage of 5% down, 350,000 average sales price out there. And at 2.5% interest, it's about $1,900. And that includes your taxes and insurance, California taxes and insurance. And at 5% interest, it goes up to $2,500. So it's $500-600 difference to get $350,000 house. I mean, and that just goes across the board. The buying power is magical right now. It's ridiculous. Yes. And you have to get that message out. You have to tell people. And then the people that are sitting there going, I'm going to wait for my rate to go to 1.5. I'm like, are you serious? All right. This is like free money. And you need to take advantage now, because you can't time that market. You don't know what's going to happen 2 months from now. That rate could go to 6 tomorrow. I've watched it happen many times.
Hey, how about last July and August, when it went from like in the 3s to 5 and the whole world went almost gave it into a mini recession. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of just reading this morning. Inflation comes out next week, PCE, and that's going to be a number that is going to be looked at. And we've seen in this business, as the economy gets better, rates are going back up. I mean, we're seeing people are saying they could go down, they could go back up. We don't have a crystal ball on that, but typically that's what happens in our business. As we look back and we're like, hey, remember a couple of weeks ago when we looked really, really good?
Alyssia, what about you? When you see this slide, what goes through your marketing mind? How could your buyer's agents use this information to get either people off the fence or find those renters that have always dreamed of owning a home? What goes through your mind?
So, we talked about this before our little call, and I had a current renter. I think being entrenched in the market right now is why we're here, and so this buyer was like, well, I'm renting right now and I don't know, I'm really overwhelmed by everything that's happening. And, because I'm sitting here going, there's 5 offers on the property. You saw it 5 minutes ago. I need you to tell me that you want to buy it or you don't. and then all the strategies that I've talked about, presenting her best foot forward. And I said, look, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen here is that in 5 years of owning this home, maybe the property doesn't appreciate as much as maybe it could. So you have to either, you don't get any money, or you maybe bring a little bit of money to the table. Well, when you do the calculation on rent for the next 5 years, you've then, pissed away 50 grand. So owning is always better. And when you have an additional $32,000 of buying power, the two things that go through my mind are, great, now you have a cushion to fight for the house that you really want.
Yep.
Because you have to fight. And or you can buy more, or you can save. You don't have to, you thought you had to, your mortgage payment would be this because this is what you're paying in rent, but it's actually less. So, I said to her, get a roommate. I'm like, and then have them pay you. And I'm like, now you've got somebody else. I'm like, that's way, I literally said this to her. I said, can you ask a friend of yours to just deposit money into a savings account for you every month? She goes, no. I'm like, you can when you get a roommate if you buy a house.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's the perfect, it's the old marketing we used to do. And then we would give it to the tenants as well. Rent versus own. It's a flyer. You create a flyer with it. You do a video now about it. What is the benefit of renting versus owning, and vice versa? And right now, you need to buy, because the actual amount of money you're paying for a mortgage payment is actually less in some markets than what rents are right now.
Oh,
and
it's undoubtedly less.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. And the reverse of that is you have a seller that gets cold feet about selling because they can't find their next home to buy. Every market I've ever been in like this, I've always told the seller, do the sacrifice, rent, sell your house, put the money in the bank, and be a renter for 6 months. Yep. So that you have bargaining power. Your money's in the bank. There's no contingency. You can go in and you can get whatever you want, negotiate hard. And so you have to sacrifice in a rental in an apartment for a while. Do it. It's worth it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you VRBO and get something for 30 to 45 or 60 days.
So many more options nowadays than there was 10 years ago.
Right. My assistant Ruby just sold her place, right? Cashed out, made a fortune for her in the last 3 years. And she's like, I'm scrambling. I need to buy a house now. And the editor said, whoa.
Slow down.
Let's go find a 1-bedroom rental, a short term. And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm like, right, now you have all the cash.
It's Phil Jackson, the zen of real estate. It's like when the game gets a little fast, slow the pace down and take control back.
Right. Yeah. Love it. Let's show this next slide, because I think this will be the slide. I mean, there's a lot of great slides here, but this is going to be the slide that people are going to be posting over and over and over, because this one we have to explain. The next one punches people right in the face.
Yeah, let me give you a little setup on that slide. It comes out of a study from NAR. Lawrence Yun said this, and this is the reality of the market. Although housing prices have consistently moved higher, when the favorable mortgage rates are factored in, an overall home purchase was more affordable in 2020's second quarter compared to 1 year ago. Yeah. So literally what's happening in the market is we're rolling back time, and the research team built this slide. The last time housing was this affordable by state. And you look across here and you go, wow, lower rates have literally put us in a position where homes are as affordable as they were. You can see it by state, some pre-1995, which is shocking. Some, you mentioned Idaho, current, but affordability dominating the storyline there in purchasing today.
Yeah, the one I was shocked was Maryland. Alicia's like, not me, but that one shocked. Kentucky, West Virginia, I totally understand. Iowa, I was actually really shocked about. I mean, Iowa, if anybody's paying attention, has become a pretty interesting tech hub. A lot of companies are going there and making sort of affordability to live and work, et cetera, phenomenal. Arkansas, Louisiana, I wasn't shocked about, but your state, right? There we go. Idaho, the only orange one, Yvonne.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is an incredible thing that's going on over here. from the southern part to the northern part. In southern Idaho, Boise is going to be your biggest hub. That's where most of the immigrants are moving into from every state. And up here in northern Idaho, we're 50 miles south of the Canadian border in Sandpoint. And I'm getting calls on our lots, on listings from West Virginia, from Florida, from Texas, all over, Colorado, Utah. They're not just coming from California. And that's one of the things people need to understand. Yeah. There's a large influx from California into Idaho, mostly southern Idaho. However, it's really from all over. And it's been affordable. And remember, Idaho as a state only has 1.7 million people as a state. We have 4.5 million people in San Bernardino, Riverside County, California. So when you start thinking about the numbers and then the expanse of property, now a lot of that land in Idaho is national forestry and all of that. So, and open space. But there's a lot of room to grow. It'll run into problems. I mean, we know that already. We're going to run into, they just did a census. A guy came around, knocked on the door yesterday and, what are you doing and who lives here and all that, because we're open for another seat in the political aspect. So that's going to change some dynamics too in Idaho. So, but it's here. I mean, we've got people coming from everywhere and they're paying it. It's the sad part. The people that have been here a long time are upset because the prices have increased so much that it has priced a lot of people out of staying in their local area. But that's happened in every state of the nation.
Yeah. Hawaii used to be inexpensive.
Right.
Yeah, just for the record, oceanfront Hawaii.
Right.
When my stepmom lived there, it was very inexpensive. Alyssia, when you see this map, this to me is an entire video just going state by state, maybe region by region. What does it mean? Let's go back and say if you bought a $400,000 house this year versus a $400,000 house in 2017 in California, what do you think?
I mean, again, I love the fact that, what this shows is that we're more affordable than, generally speaking, overall, like it's all pale blue, right? So right. We're more affordable than we've been in the last seven years, whether that be interest rates or appreciation, either way, we're doing really well. In my great state of Maryland, it's interesting. I have been taught, and I see this in the up and down markets that I've experienced over the last 20 years. Maryland has a unique kind of a slight insulation. And the reason why is because we are right next to DC. So we actually have a lot of DC suburbs that are Maryland. And so DC's always in business, right? Yep. We're never not in, DC's never not in business. So we have so many things that then filter out that we didn't experience it as severe as some other parts of the country in 2007, 8, 9, and 10. I mean, we experienced it, but there are certain jurisdictions more hyper local, to Yvonne's point, that really didn't see the 30% drop. They saw maybe a 10% drop. Yep. So the fact that we're more affordable than 1995, it just kind of glosses over that we didn't really experience what everybody else experienced. And so that interest rate at 2.6, what did my client get? 2.625 or something crazy low. That is really paying a huge factor. And we didn't go down, but we also haven't gone up. And the buyers they're just not having it right now. They're fighting for it, but they're fighting for it more strategically than I think they did in 2005. They're just willy-nilly offering God knows what. And I know in some jurisdictions across the whole country, that is kind of happening again, but the banks tightened restrictions. They didn't loosen restrictions. Right. Yeah. The appraisers, I can't tell you how many tidewaters and under appraisals I have to deal with on a regular basis because they don't want this to happen again. So,
can we talk about appraisals right now? Appraisals, the appraisal industry is intriguing me right now.
It is.
In a market like North Idaho. Now, California, we have a lot of appraisers out there. So we're still getting an appraisal Their still fees are about $600 to $700 for an appraisal fee on a normal residential home. In North Idaho, there are a handful of appraisers, and there's so much stuff going on, whether it be refinances or purchases, that there isn't enough appraisers. And it's going out to bid for appraisals. And rural areas are usually like that. However, we're talking about thousands of dollars for a residential home appraisal.
Wow.
And buyers, the purchasers, are putting $1,000 incentive on top of what the lender will pay the appraiser. And, you know, it's a very interesting. We had our own personal commercial property is being purchased by a city and transportation department. So kind of like eminent domain. That appraisal would normally be, a commercial appraisal would normally be about $5-6 grand. That appraiser got $17,000 for that commercial appraisal. And so it is nuts. And it's a really interesting kind of undertone thing that people aren't talking about, but it is interesting to see that happening right now.
I'm going to go a totally different direction with you. I am so fascinated by how AI, automation, and outsourcing, let's just call it Asia, the 3 A's, right? If you look at sort of the consumer's desire for a better quality experience, from portal search to move in, move out, the entire experience, so much of this is going to be disrupted by the 3 A's, right? But when I say this, it's funny, my 21-year-old son who said, well, Dad, that sounds like real estate agents won't have a job soon. I was like, well, son, let me give you a little perspective. There's 1,000 different SKUs of an automobile today. So if I'm in the car market, there's 1,000 different SKUs. Now, what color I want, and this, and wheels, and and is it the right engine? And you get it. I still got a test drive. I said, all that still requires a salesperson. And he's like, well, okay, that makes sense. I said, now I give you that data point because I want you to consider this. There's 128 million homes in the US. Guess how many are similar? None, right? Everyone's got it. I mean, the only way we can really disrupt this, and I think the appraisals, right? They're in for a really good run. They're going to do really well because they're the ones that have to come in and they can actually say, let me explain the house. Let me explain the story. Let me tell you what it's all about. I understand, you know, this side of the street versus that side of the street, this view versus that view. None of that's going to go away right away, my friends, unless every home in America suddenly was like a cookie cutter, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,400 square foot with the same view, the same lot, the same pool. So look at Bob McCrane said, but the appraisals are all over the place.
Yes. And that's the other issue. Yeah. And so when you have that, then it takes a live person, a realtor, to then negotiate how you're going to handle that. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
I appreciate, you know, I'm in this weird generation. I'm not much younger than you, Tom, because you had a birthday. So you're in a new decade now.
I'm in that 5-0 generation. Yes,
you're in a different decade now. I'm still with a 4. But no, I straddle the old school and the new school, and I'm all for technology and automation. But what I still believe on so many levels, particularly now, and I touched on this, I think the last time we were together, is people's anxiety is super high, and a robot's not going to fix that. And that's only going to be taken care of by a human, by being able to say things like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? Yeah. Only a human can do that. Yeah. And, you know, I can tell you right now, I have 4 closings scheduled for next week. In fact, my phone is blowing up right now with people who don't know that I'm on a national webinar. Like, I need to talk to you. Because there are problems, and problems get solved by humans, yes, not by computers. Yes. So I don't think you can safely tell your son that we're all going to still be employed. But as you've said, the cream will rise to the top. 100%. There will be no room for the agent who is not skilled and knowledgeable and treating this as a full profession. When showing time was down yesterday, a lot of the new, it was really honestly kind of funny. Yeah. The new agents are like, what do you mean? How do I schedule an appointment?
How do I schedule an appointment? Oh my God. Oh,
you have no idea. It was kind of funny. It was like, well, you have to pick up the phone and call the listing agent. And they're like, for all of them? Oh, it's really fun.
You should just always have an MLS book sitting inside your office from like 35 years ago. Just go, here.
There you go.
Here's the homes for sale.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes, I think that automation's great. And I think that it's going to make us better, faster, stronger, more knowledgeable, but it still needs to be human powered.
Always. We're going to talk about that a lot, by the way, at the summit. David, take us back into, I'm looking at this Javier Vivas, I think I'm saying that right, this slide. Talk to us about this quote. And we were just talking about housing market recovery data. Let's jump into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is the story right here. As we look at that affordability, all that, what does that mean going forward? And so I think that it's articulated well here from Javier at Realtor.com. It says, with supply and demand moving in opposite directions, if you remember that slide we've used, sellers are clearly gaining the upper hand in the market as buyer competition builds up and prices gain momentum going into the fall. Yeah. And so what we see is all the things we've talked about going into the fall is that, pricing is gaining momentum. And we've used this slide here, again, from the Housing Market Recovery's NAR's Recovery Index. You see we're at 104.8. We've kind of broken through that baseline of February 1st, not quite the 106.5 where we started before the downturn, but we're real close right now when we look at demand, supply, time on market, all the factors that are brought there relative to the strength of the market as we go forward. So, I look at this and I go, okay, look, we've talked about this, for many weeks now. We dropped down, we're, coming back up, and I think certainly where we stand today on the 21st, like you started off the call with here in August, I've seen the housing market recovering very well from everything that's gone on over the summer.
Yeah. So I'm really glad we're going to have this next discussion. We got a few more slides for my friends out there watching. I teased you in the beginning saying new construction is a really important leading indicator everyone needs to be paying attention to. Yeah. I don't care if you're in New York City or New South Wales, Sydney, Australia, like new construction really is a super important leading indicator. So David, you and the team put together a bunch of really interesting data points on this.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into it.
I think this story here, the research team's done a wonderful job looking at what's going on with builders, and some very good information coming out in the last week that I'll share. And I think it's going to be really good to say, okay, what do we do to capitalize on this? So I'll start with the Zillow quote. Page views for new construction listings increased dramatically during the spring and summer, with greater than 34% year-over-year growth over the last 4 months. And we're up 81% in July as shoppers continue to show interest in designing a new home. Talked about this and the needs that are out there today that weren't there 4, 5, 6 months ago, and saying, okay, let's go out now. We can afford it. We can buy the home that we want. We've got increased purchasing power, and builders are no doubt feeling that. So as we look forward from MBA, Mortgage Bankers Association, new home sales activity continued to rebound in July after a pandemic-induced low point in April. In fact, applications for new home purchases with home builder affiliates were 39% higher than July of last year. So significant activity, not just in theory of, builders are seeing this. Now, what was published here is builder confident at the highest reading in the 35-year measure of that series that just came out. So we're seeing the needs change and folks going in and saying we want to do that. We're seeing activity happening, and builders certainly reflect that in the index, housing market index, and their confidence in the market. I mean, just an example of this drive back forward. Go ahead.
This slide right here, I think, is critical for people to really absorb. The little note that I just wrote down, if you guys can see me writing, is I want every one of you today to do an Instagram story, or just Instagram story, because I want to be able to say yes or no. If everyone with me on that sort of yes, no polling. The question is, are you living in your dream work, teach, and live home now? Because you look at what are a lot of people doing right now, right? Are you living in your dream work, teach, and live home now? And then the next page for me would be, have you had any thoughts of making a change? Yes or no? I challenge every one of you to do that today and just watch the responses. As I talk to just friends of mine that are saying, I loved forever the quaintness of my little 2-bedroom, 2-bath bungalow, in the village. They're now like, I need a pool, I need a backyard, I need a home office. And these are the same things you've been hearing for the last, 120 days, right? Really more so the last 60 days. But you might want to just test that today and see the kind of response you're going to get. When I go back to that Zillow slide, all these people dreaming and fantasizing about building their home, trust me, and they're not thinking, how do I get something smaller with less space?
Right.
Alyssia?
I had a coaching call with someone yesterday who is in the New York state. So about a 2-hour-ish commute from the city. And she said, and she's like, I think the third string choice of suburbs for people who are trying to leave the verticals. And so she's like, well, they were going to the Hamptons, and the Hamptons are priced out, and then they're going, and she mentioned a couple of other areas, and she's like, and now they're coming to us because I guess their median prices is like 4 to 6. Oh. And you can get a single family home with all the stuff, right? Yeah. So all the things that you just mentioned, live, work, teach, whatever, plus the yard, and they can't, same thing, they cannot keep the inventory. They just can't.
Yeah. And you talk about Idaho, we come up into Idaho and you're getting a 2.5 to 8 acre parcel, and able to build your house on it. And that property is maybe $120,000. And however, problem is builders are quoting 2 years out for the completion of the construction. So it's, but it's everybody, and retirees. They're looking to build a house. They're moving to Arizona and they want new construction. It's a very interesting thing with the contractors. And I think the builders right now are really happy that they didn't load up on inventory, because that's one of the reasons that they are happy right now, because they don't have the standing inventory like they did back when the market was hot before the crash. And they ran into a lot of problems at that point. So one of the things I would tell you, though, the realtors out there need to be paying close attention. New construction and pending resale houses. You need to be talking to the new construction sales offices, make friends with them, talk to them.
The next slide, right?
I've got a build. Oh, is it? Yeah.
I don't know.
I've got a buyer that can slide right in. So.
And it's funny, David. I feel like I'm taking over Tom's job, but that's what you get when you ask for 2-3 rows.
Right.
David, cue up that slide.
See you, Tom. You got this.
I was already there. It was a great setup. Great setup.
So, it's funny, and you're this is exactly the slide. I literally got a call from a new home construction rep, either a text. We did a deal earlier in the spring. My people bought a house. She loved me. I have these great little trifolds that I created for basically it's like a business card, right? It's just that this is who I am. This is how I'm going to sell your house, kind of thing. And I gave them to her, and she literally was like, I need more. I need more of those trifolds, because I have so many people that want to buy these houses that don't have realtors. She's like, and I love you because I know you're going to sell it. You're not going to get in the way. It's super important. The flip side of that is, I think part of the reason why the building is doing so well is you have the whole, however many television channels dedicated to, flips and renovations and new construction, and everybody wants the shiny new penny. That is also a tale of two markets. If there is a home that is in, and I even have a slide in my listing presentation that says top 10 pitfalls. One of the things is, if you think that updates or renovations made greater than 7 years ago are current, you are sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
I have 2 houses or 3 houses in my current neighborhood on the market. They're just sitting stale because they look like they're straight out of 1988. And they're asking a premium price. You can't ask that. But to get through to the current crop of homeowners that your house is dated and people don't want it is actually very, very difficult. They just don't want to hear it. They have to sit on the market. If you look at the expired data, these homes they get listed, come off, get listed, come off. Sometimes it's 3 years with hundreds of thousands of dollars of price reductions before they finally figure out this is actually what my home is worth.
And to that point, realtors need to really up their game with the technology, because you can take a house that's outdated like that and do some virtual staging photos. And you get that out there, because now the buyer can now picture what it will look like. And if you want to go a step further, get some contracts that says, here's what it'll cost you. We've gotten some bids from some contractors. Here's what it'll cost you to make this room or this part of the house look like this. And you've got to give the ideas, because as a daughter of a builder, married to a builder, been around the new construction industry my entire life, people want to build a new house, but they don't really have any vision of what it will look like. You got to give them the vision.
David, let's go to that builder confidence, and we're almost near our time. We got 2 important slides left here. So the one I'm looking at, this builder confidence matches all-time high. Again, based on record traffic, is an important message.
Right. So this, this message here is kind of the text of what that graphic shows. It comes out of National Home Builders. In a sign that housing continues to lead the economy forward, builder confidence in the market for newly built single-family home increased 6 points to 78 in August, according to the latest National Home Builder Wells Fargo Housing Market Index. And again, it's the highest reading in the 35-year history series of that, matching the record back in 1988. So I think that message of building relationships with builders right now is what we're talking about. Kind of going back to the slide that that you were mentioning before, that home builders are looking for agents to be able to partner with. I'll just read it here. Builders are reportedly looking to build long-term relationships with real estate professionals, and builders realize they need real estate pros to bring qualified home shoppers to their builders' sales offices as resale inventory remains tight. Agents are realizing they need to build builders to give their buyers more options. So, I'll let you guys discuss that, but really that idea about building relationships with builders, and I think you gave a great example earlier of it, Alyssia, in thinking about that, how does that fit into my business?
Yeah. Let's talk, ladies, just for a minute, or strategically. We have a lot of friends out there watching right now. What's the best way to approach the builder, right? Or that maybe the person is building 10, 15 houses, or 3 or 4 houses. What do you think is the best way to approach that builder?
You go.
Look them up and just talk to them. Go out and see them. Take them to lunch. Take lunch to them. Just build the relationship like you would a client. It's that simple. And then know what the market's doing. Who's their competition? Do you know who they're competing against? And what is one subdivision builder, charging, and what's the other one? And go talk to them about what they're doing. We need to pull that data up so that we can do that. But I would add one more thing. That same relationship building takes place amongst realtors. If you have a buyer that cannot get into a house, you need to call the realtors who have listings that are pended, that are already under contract, and say, listen, I got a buyer, call me first. We'll slide them right in. The lender's ready to go. All we need is an appraisal. And so let me know if that deal falls out, because we are seeing deals fall out of escrow.
Right.
So.
Right. Alyssia, thoughts on on building the relationships with the builders?
On the builder relationships, obviously, what Yvonne said, I'd go out and do a video. I'd either do a live video, or I'd, have somebody else saying, hey, this is, and let them live and tag the builder, promote the builder. When you do things for someone, they then want to do things for you. Yeah. So finding out what their pain points and difficulties are, and try to fill those gaps. But my knee jerk would be to go with a video camera.
And exactly right. And also on top of that, tour those tracks, tour those models. Right. Make it a weekly habit of part of your prospecting that you're going and seeing those models that are out there, meeting them, and do the video at the same time. This week I'm at Arcterra, and they offer homes at this price range and with this square footage, and they have a couple of lots available. and yada, yada, do a video about it, just like we were doing with restaurants before. Now we're doing it with builders. And I really think we need to get the word out about that. Every single market. In fact, it's interesting. I coach agents in lots of markets: Georgia, Alabama, Arizona, Washington. Every single one of those clients have builder relationships, every single one. So they're everywhere in the United States.
Absolutely.
I love it. You guys can see me, I'm taking notes. I love it. Good idea. So David, as we wrap this up, I know we're going to be together in 2 weeks for the summit. Yeah. So my friends that are out there watching, there will not be a This Week in Housing show. In 2 weeks, we'll be live in a virtual summit with tens of thousands of agents around the world. I certainly hope that you are one of them. My goodness, if you've not gotten an email from me or seen an ad from me, you've been hiding under a rock. If you're looking for a sign, this is a sign. You should be there. Right? You should absolutely join us. But David, we'll pick it back up in a month following this. So sort of closing thoughts or recommendations for all of our friends out there as we wrap this up?
Well, I would go off that and say, hey, if you're not registered for the summit, get registered. I mean, it's, thinking about that in just a couple of weeks. I wish we could all be together in person like we've been, but virtually it's going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think the message really as we go through this is, what do we need to know going into the fall? That's what we're going to be talking about. You know what I mean? I see it there. You're there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm excited about that, Tom. Excited to play a small part in that and be a part of that. And we're going to be talking about the election. That's a big, big piece. We talked about it before. This is going to continue to heat up and continue to be talked about. And we want to get you well positioned with some great, great visuals to talk about what we can see happening in the market relative to that. So I'm excited about it.
Yes. And I heard, I was watching a Dana White, the president of USC, I guess, Joe Biden is going to fight Trump before the election, and that should determine the match. So
right. The pay-per-view on that could certainly help, contribute to some of this. So
absolutely. Going back to headlines do more to terrify than clarify. All right. Well, listen, my friends, I wish you a happy Friday and a great weekend. Use this information as always. You see on there, go to mykcm.com/Tom Ferry. That's where you'll find all the slides. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, bringing in the extra red power and the brilliance of you both. I wish everybody a great weekend. Get out there and sell a bunch, and we'll see you in 2 weeks at the summit. Take care, my friends.